These are dandelion leaves. What do you find comes to mind when you see a dandelion? And if this weed were growing in your garden or your yard, what would you feel the urge to do? Sounds like a lot of work. Did you know you could just... It's food. Every single part of the dandelion is nutritious, delicious, and ubiquitous. It's a wonder weed, a snap snack. It's an everywhere edible. Incredibly, it's not the only one. Lamb's quarter, purslane, pepperweed, plantain, curly dock, clover, these crops grow out of cracks in driveways. I know this because all of these plants are literally growing out of cracks in my driveway. I call it my Thrive-way. Weeds to some might be a pest, but for the birds, the bees, and me's, they're the best. They're not detestable, they're delectable. This is our backyard. When we moved in, our neighbors on all sides kindly and generously offered their Todds to control what they considered our weed problem. Well, what makes a weed a problem? What is a weed? If kale and spinach aren't weeds, then why are purslane and lamb's quarter? If a daisy is a flower, then why is its edible cousin, a dandelion, a weed? Well, let's ask our local government. According to Lancaster County, a weed is a plant considered undesirable, unattractive, or troublesome, especially one that grows where it isn't wanted or takes the place of desired plants. But the difference between weeds and a garden is who you're asking, because so far in my backyard, I've snacked on or self-prescribed all of the weeds I've already mentioned, plus elderberries, mulberries, daylilies, shepherd's purse, catnip, yarrow, motherwort. And most excitingly of all, there's a linden tree. Growing in our front yard. You can eat the leaves. You can make the flowers into tea. And these 40-foot salads are growing as far as the eye can see. They say that money doesn't grow on trees, but if I save money by eating leaves off the linden trees, then it kind of does. Do you agree? Do you see? By just waiting, we've allowed an accidental food forest to flourish. It's like oops food or a lazy lunch. It's our grocery store. And after experiencing the life-changing transformation of getting to know the plants in my yard and letting them grow, I began to ask, why, oh why, would I ever mow? Well, according to the city of Lincoln, it shall be the duty of every owner of real estate in the city to cut and clear all weeds or worthless vegetation whenever they shall extend more than 6 inches above the ground. Failure to do so is a misdemeanor. So to our neighbors who didn't know what was growing, our backyard was literally breaking the law. But to us, it was a thriving garden. The difference between weeds and flowers was our perspective. Beauty is in the eye of the weed holder. Today, in America, grass is our most grown crop by area, by water, and by fertilizer. And strangely, it's our only crop that gets mowed down and unused. Every year, 17 million gallons of gas and oil are spilled while we're trying to refill the tanks of our lawnmowers. One running lawnmower pollutes as much as 8 cars going 55 miles per hour. And every day in America, 220 people, or I guess a little less than 220 people, are sent to the emergency room from lawn mowing accidents. A lawnmower eats fossil fuels and farts global warming gases. And a plant eats some of these greenhouse gases and farts oxygen. And we breathe oxygen, right? Am I missing something here? A lawnmower might lop off a finger, and a plant might be food. We eat food. I like all my fingers just the way they are. If it's so laughably baffling, then why is a mowed lawn the law of the land? Why are we so obsessed with grass? Well, as it turns out, our love of grass comes from our past. As hunter-herder-gatherers, short grasses meant meandering, munching, mammalian, meat or milk makers were near. Instead of mowed, grass got mooed. Instead of bad lawn care, we had bad lawn care. Then as wealth collected into the hands of the few, the wealthy, lawns became a status symbol, a non-functional art piece meant to showcase a landlord's dominance over their land and also their people. Now fast forward to modern-day suburbia, we've cast ourselves both as royalty, who are apparently so wealthy we don't want food growing around us, and as peasants, who have to work all day, partially for food money, and then work extra, killing all the food in our yard. That's how fundamental and worrisome the Mow mentality is. Throughout history, we've believed that entire races of people are undesirable, unattractive, and troublesome, growing where they aren't wanted and taking the place of a desired race. Have humanity's worst regimes treated their unwanted people the way we treat our unwanted plants? My time gardening has taught me that perhaps our attitude towards our plants and our land becomes our attitude towards our animals, which becomes our attitude towards ourselves and each other. Instead of cutting each other down, instead of discouraging the different, be it person or plant, let's commit to understanding each other and letting each other grow. I was lucky. When I was 4, my playful plunking on the piano probably sounded pretty undesirable, unattractive, and troublesome. My parents could have saved themselves more than a few headaches by weeding that habit out of my garden and telling me to give it up for good. But instead, they gave me space, soil, and sun in the form of a piano, lessons, and their unconditional love and support. And now I'm bearing fruit. Because they let me grow, now they get to come to my shows. And as it turns out, not mowing and therefore growing is just plain easier. And if you tally up the votes from the rest of the circle of life, it's democratically better. So can we just let food grow instead of mowing it all down? Is that too radical? I don't mean to offend anybody or scare the children in the audience with my crazy ideas, but what if we just planted food on purpose? What if Lincoln were lined with fruit trees, vegetables, berry bushes, and herbs, in addition to our already everywhere edibles? What if the Capitol were surrounded with corn, or native Nebraskan prairie, or by community gardens, or even goats? We have a golden sower on our Capitol, so can we start sowing seeds instead of mowing weeds? Now you may be asking, where to start? But sometimes it's a matter of where to stop. You know the golden rule, the one about doing to others what you want them to do to you? Can we start calling it the garden rule and applying it to our yards as well? If you don't want someone mowing down your house with spinning blades of steel, then don't mow. Anytime you see a plant, animal, or anything, ask yourself, what is this and how is it awesome? Because guess what? Everything is awesome. That spider that you thought was a menace might be a talented up-and-coming web designer. That plant that you thought was a weed might be your new deodorant. It might help you sleep. It might cure your headache, heartache, toothache, or bellyache. For heaven's sake, it might be food. So how do we turn our grass into garden? Do you have to find the rig to dig or the will to till? Do you have to toil with the soil or pay for spray? The answer I found is no. I too once had grass in my yard. So I made a batch of what I call lasagna. Grass, cardboard, compost, seeds, water, voila! This is my yard just 3.5 months after the first picture. My friends, gardening is easy. In fact, it's so easy, we're already doing it. And by letting our everywhere edibles thrive, by growing markets instead of mowing carpets, we'll be healthier, wealthier, and therefore happier. We'll start to welcome the unfamiliar, not with fear, anxiety, and anger, but with curiosity, acceptance, and love. We all agree that loving our neighbor is crucial for a healthful community. So can we extend our definition of neighbor to include animals and plants as well? And plus, what human neighbor doesn't love fresh food and pretty flowers? So in summary, let's look before we cook. Perhaps a bunch of munch is right outside your door, saving you the chore of having to buy more food from the store. Let's lunch before we punch. Perhaps if we share more food, we'll be less rude. Let's plant before we rant. This is another way of saying let's criticize by creating. Let's seed before we weed. I believe in the seeds of this revolution so deeply that if you want to turn your grass into a garden and you can't do it on your own, and you need a capable, strong young man with a good sturdy back to help, my friend Casey will help you out. But seriously, this is a genuine offer. If you want to pass on grass and get started on gardening your land, and you need a hand, understand, I'm your man. I've got a plan. I will show up in my minivan, ready to do what I can, so that we can all grow before we mow.